She survived being locked in an attic. She survived her family's cruelty. She became queen against all odds. But what happens when the crown you fought so hard to wear becomes the very thing threatening to destroy you? When friends turn to enemies, when the people you're trying to save turn against you, and when the man you love must choose between you and his kingdom? Queen Grace discovered that winning the crown was only the beginning of the battle. 6 months had passed since Grace became queen, and the palace felt more like a gilded prison than a home. She sat at the formal breakfast table, surrounded by foreign ambassadors and Nigerian nobles, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her water glass. The conversation flowed in English, then French, then back to English, and Grace struggled to keep pace. When the Moroccan ambassador addressed her in French, she responded in English, not understanding the cultural protocol. The room went silent for just a moment, barely noticeable, but Grace felt it like a slap. Across the table, Chief Samuel's eyes flickered with concern, but he said nothing. The nobles, however, exchanged knowing glances. Grace saw them. She always saw them. After the breakfast ended, Grace excused herself and walked quickly through the marble corridors, her elaborate gown rustling with each step. She could hear whispers following her like shadows. "Did you see that?" She used the dessert fork for the main course. 6 months as queen and still no refinement. What was Prince Michael thinking? Grace's throat tightened, but she kept walking until she reached her chambers. She closed the door and leaned against it, fighting tears. This wasn't how she imagined queenship would feel. She had Michael's love, yes, but love wasn't enough to navigate the treacherous waters of royal protocol and noble expectations. She was drowning, and no one seemed to notice except to criticize her struggle. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Your Majesty?" A gentle voice called. "It's Amara. May I come in?" Grace opened the door to find Amara, Chief Okafor's daughter, standing with a sympathetic smile. Amara was everything Grace wasn't. Polished, educated in London, fluent in 4 languages, trained from birth for high society. She was also one of the women who'd attended the ball hoping to catch Michael's eye. "I saw what happened at breakfast," Amara said softly. "These things can be so overwhelming. I thought perhaps you might like some company. Maybe I could help you with some of the protocols. I know how difficult it can be." Grace felt a wave of relief wash over her. Finally, someone who understood. Someone offering friendship instead of judgment. "Would you? That would be wonderful. I feel so lost sometimes." Amara stepped inside, her smile widening. "Of course. That's what friends are for." She settled onto the velvet sofa, her movements graceful and practiced. "You know, my father always said that queenship is learned, not inherited. You just need the right teacher." For the first time that day, Grace smiled. She didn't notice the calculating gleam in Amara's eyes or the way she glanced around the room, taking mental notes of everything. She didn't see Chief Samuel passing by the door, pausing when he heard Amara's voice, his face darkening with suspicion. Later that afternoon, Grace visited the one place where she truly felt at home, her foundation for orphan children. The moment she stepped through the doors, the tension in her shoulders melted away. Children ran to her, calling, "Queen Grace, Queen Grace." But in their voices, there was only love, no judgment about which fork she used or how she pronounced French words. She spent hours there, helping with homework, reading stories, simply being present. This was who she really was, not the woman fumbling through state dinners, but the woman who understood what it meant to be alone and afraid. As the sun began to set, Grace reluctantly prepared to leave. Walking back through the orphanage halls, she passed by a storage room where staff members were having a hushed conversation. "I'm telling you, she doesn't belong here. She's playing dress-up in the Queen's clothes. Did you hear she couldn't even greet the Moroccan ambassador properly? Embarrassing. Prince Michael must regret his choice. He could have married Amara, someone actually suited for this life." Grace froze, her hand on the wall to steady herself. The words cut deeper because part of her feared they were true. She slipped away before they could see her, but the damage was done. As her car pulled away from the foundation, Grace stared out the window at the Lagos skyline. She was caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. In the palace, she was too common. Among the people, she was now too royal. And in the shadows, Amara's friendship was slowly becoming the rope Grace didn't realize was tightening around her neck. The next morning, Amara arrived at the palace with an armful of etiquette books and a warm smile. "I thought we could start with diplomatic protocols," she suggested, settling into Grace's private study. "The state dinner next month will be crucial." Grace welcomed her eagerly, and over the following weeks, Amara became her constant companion. They had tea together, studied together, and Amara was always ready with advice about how to navigate palace politics. Grace, lonely and overwhelmed, found herself confiding in Amara about everything. Her insecurities, her fears that she wasn't good enough, her memories of how her aunt treated her after her parents died. "You know what the worst part was?" Grace said one afternoon, her voice breaking. "Aunt Beatrice made me feel invisible, like I didn't deserve to exist in her world. And sometimes when I'm at those state dinners, surrounded by all those refined people, I feel that same way again." Amara nodded sympathetically, her phone resting casually on the table between them, its voice recorder capturing every word. "I understand completely. But you're queen now. You don't have to prove anything to anyone." What Grace didn't see was how Amara's eyes gleamed with satisfaction, or how she rushed to her car afterward to send the recordings to her father. Chief Okafor had been humiliated when his daughter wasn't chosen at the ball, his carefully laid plans for a royal marriage destroyed by an orphan girl with no connections. Now, he and Amara were crafting their revenge, one friendly conversation at a time. The foundation's celebration was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon. Grace had worked tirelessly to make it happen. 100 orphans successfully placed in loving homes. It was her proudest achievement as queen, proof that she could make a real difference. The courtyard was decorated with balloons and streamers, and the children performed songs they'd rehearsed for weeks. When it was Grace's turn to speak, she stood before the crowd with her mother's locket clutched in her hand. "I know what it's like to be an orphan," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "I know what it's like to feel like nobody wants you, like you're a burden. After my parents died, I lived with family who made me feel worthless every single day. I created this foundation so no child would ever have to feel that way again." The crowd erupted in applause. The children cheered. Grace felt tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of joy, of purpose. This was why she was queen. Not for the state dinners or the protocol, but for this, for them. In the back of the courtyard, Amara held up her phone, filming everything. But her focus wasn't on the celebration, it was on capturing Grace's words about feeling worthless, about being unwanted, about living with family who made her a burden. That evening, Michael found Grace on their private balcony, staring at the city lights. "You were magnificent today," he said, wrapping his arms around her. "The way you spoke to those children, the way you connected with them. That's the woman I fell in love with." "Michael, can I ask you something?" Grace leaned back against him. "Do you ever regret choosing me? Be honest." He turned her to face him, his expression serious. "Never. Not for a single moment." "Why would you ask that?" "Because I see how I embarrass you at state functions. I see how the nobles look at me. I heard Amara mention that some of the council members think you made a mistake." Michael's jaw tightened. "Amara said that?" "She was just being honest, trying to prepare me. She's been such a good friend." Something flickered across Michael's face, concern, doubt, but Grace didn't notice. She was too focused on her own insecurities. What neither of them knew was that while they stood on that balcony, Chief Okafor was hosting a dinner party where Grace was being systematically destroyed with carefully constructed lies and veiled insults. "She's quite sweet, really," one noblewoman said, her voice dripping with false kindness. "Simple, but sweet. Like a child playing at being an adult." Chief Okafor sipped his wine, his smile thin. "My daughter has been helping her navigate society. It's charity work, really. The poor girl has no idea how out of her depth she is." The nobles laughed, and the poison spread. Meanwhile, Grace was reviewing the Foundation's financial reports when something caught her eye. A payment to a vendor she didn't recognize. Then another. The amounts were small, but when she added them up over several months, nearly 2 million naira was missing. She felt her stomach drop. She grabbed her phone and called the Foundation director. "Mrs. Johnson, can you explain these payments? I don't recognize this vendor name." There was a pause on the other end. "Your Majesty, I assumed those were approved by you. The invoices came through the normal channels." Grace's hands shook as she stared at the numbers. Something was wrong, very wrong. She needed to investigate, but quietly. If word got out that the Queen's Foundation had missing funds, the scandal would be enormous. She thought about calling Michael, but he was dealing with a crisis in the eastern states. She didn't want to burden him with more problems. Instead, she called Amara. "Missing money?" Amara's voice was soothing through the phone. "Grace, you're probably just looking at it wrong. These accounting things are complicated. I'm sure there's a simple explanation. Maybe the vendor changed names or there was a clerical error. Don't worry about it. You have enough stress with the state dinner coming up." Grace wanted to believe her. She needed to believe someone was on her side. "You're probably right. I'm just being paranoid." "Exactly. Now, let's focus on making sure you're prepared for next week. That's what matters." After hanging up, Amara immediately texted her father. "She's noticed the missing funds. We need to move faster." Chief Okafor's response was immediate. "Proceed with the state dinner plan. After tomorrow night, she'll be too destroyed to investigate anything." Grace set down the financial reports, trying to push her concerns aside. But deep in her gut, alarm bells were ringing. She just didn't know yet that the fire was already lit, and she was standing in the center of the flames. The state dinner was the social event of the season. Foreign dignitaries from 15 countries, every major Nigerian noble family, international media, everything was perfectly orchestrated. Grace had spent weeks preparing with Amara's help, memorizing protocols, practicing greetings in different languages. She wore a stunning emerald green gown, her hair swept up elegantly. She looked every inch a queen, even if she didn't feel like one. What Grace didn't know was that Amara had switched her protocol briefing the night before. The document Grace studied contained deliberately wrong information, incorrect greeting customs, wrong titles, inappropriate conversation topics. Every detail designed to make her fail spectacularly. The dinner began beautifully. Grace greeted the first few guests successfully, her confidence growing. Then the Senegalese ambassador arrived. Following the protocol she'd studied, Grace extended her hand for a handshake. The ambassador's face registered shock. In his culture, such direct physical contact from a woman to a man in formal settings was deeply inappropriate. The correct greeting was a bow with hands pressed together. The moment was captured by dozens of cameras. The ambassador recovered quickly, but the damage was done. The flash bulbs exploded. Grace felt her cheeks burning as she realized something was wrong, but she didn't know what. She pushed forward, greeting the next guest, then the next, each interaction slightly off, slightly wrong, death by 1,000 small mistakes. By the time dinner was served, Grace was rattled. She watched the other guests carefully, trying to figure out where she'd gone wrong. During the meal, she attempted to discuss trade policies with the Ghanaian finance minister, a topic her briefing had marked as appropriate. His expression turned cold. Trade discussions during dinner were considered gauche in his delegation's protocol. They should be saved for official meetings. The evening that was supposed to establish Grace as a capable queen instead became a showcase of her inadequacy. Every noble in attendance witnessed it. Every camera recorded it. And within hours, the footage was everywhere. Grace returned to her chambers and made the mistake of looking at social media. The hashtags were already trending. #NotMyQueen, #ServantQueen, #RoyalMistake. Videos of her mistakes played on a loop, dissected by commentators, mocked by critics. Memes spread like wildfire. When you let anyone become queen, showed a screenshot of her confused face. She can't even greet people properly, had thousands of shares. Grace locked her door and slid down to the floor, her elaborate gown pooling around her. The phone in her shaking hands displayed a never-ending stream of hatred. She's an embarrassment. Michael should divorce her. We deserve better than this commoner playing dress-up. Michael knocked on the door. Grace. Let me in. Please. Go away, she choked out through tears. You shouldn't be associated with me. I've humiliated you. I've humiliated the entire kingdom. That's not true. Grace, open the door. We can fix this. How? How do you fix everyone knowing your queen is a failure? Through the door, Michael's voice was pained. You're not a failure. Someone gave you wrong information. This wasn't your fault. But Grace couldn't hear him over the roar of her own shame. She turned off her phone, unable to bear seeing one more cruel comment, but the damage was done. The words were burned into her brain. The next morning, Amara arrived with coffee and sympathy. I'm so sorry about last night. I can't believe how cruel people are being. But Grace, maybe this is a sign. Maybe you should consider stepping back from public duties for a while. Focus on the foundation instead. Let things calm down. Grace looked at her friend through swollen, red-rimmed eyes. Everyone's saying I should step aside. That I'm not fit to be queen. Not everyone, Amara said soothingly. But the seed was planted. What Grace didn't see was Amara's satisfied smile as she left. What she didn't hear was Chief Okafor's press conference that afternoon, calling for Grace to receive proper training, or step aside for someone more qualified. The nobles piled on, each one adding their voice to the chorus of criticism. By the evening, Grace stood in front of her full-length mirror, staring at her reflection in the elaborate queen's gown. The woman looking back at her was a stranger, dressed in silks and jewels, but underneath still just the orphan girl everyone said didn't belong. She touched the glass, her fingerprints leaving marks on the perfect surface. Maybe they're right, she whispered to her reflection. Maybe I am just playing dress-up. Behind her, unnoticed in the corner of her room, a small crack appeared in the palace wall. It was barely visible, just a hairline fracture in the perfect marble. But cracks, even small ones, have a way of spreading. And Grace's foundation, both literal and metaphorical, was beginning to crumble. In the shadows outside her door, Amara stood listening, a smile playing at her lips. The queen was breaking exactly as planned. Grace couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m, she gave up trying and slipped out of the palace through a servant's entrance, her hood pulled low. The orphanage was dark when she arrived, but she had a key. She let herself in quietly, not wanting to wake anyone. But as she walked past the director's office, she saw light under the door. Mrs. Johnson sat at her desk, surrounded by papers, tears streaming down her face. She looked up when Grace entered, shock and relief flooding her features. Your Majesty, what are you doing here so late? I couldn't sleep. Mrs. Johnson, what's wrong? The older woman's composure crumbled. We're nearly bankrupt. I've been going through the books all night, trying to understand how this happened. We should have plenty of funds, the government grants came through, the private donations were substantial, but somehow we're barely able to feed the children. The utilities company is threatening to cut off electricity. I don't know what to do. Grace felt ice flood her veins. Show me everything. Now. For the next 3 hours, they went through every transaction, every payment, every invoice. And slowly, a pattern emerged. Payments to vendors that didn't exist. Invoices for services never rendered. Money flowing out in a steady stream to shell companies with vague names and untraceable addresses. Someone had been systematically embezzling from the foundation for months. Grace's hands shook as she traced the money trail. Some of the approvals bore forged signatures, including her own. Whoever was doing this had access to palace systems. Inside knowledge, high-level connections. As dawn broke through the office windows, Grace found one payment that made her blood run cold. A transfer to Okafor Consulting Services for administrative oversight. Mrs. Johnson, who approved this payment, the director checked her records. It came through the Palace Advisory Office. The recommendation was signed by Chief Okafor himself, and your office allegedly confirmed it. I never confirmed anything to Chief Okafor. I've never even spoken to him about the foundation. Grace gathered all the evidence, stuffing papers into her bag. She needed to tell Michael immediately. This wasn't just theft, it was corruption at the highest levels. Children were going hungry so that Chief Okafor and his allies could line their pockets. She returned to the palace as the sun rose, her mind racing. Michael was in an early morning meeting, so she waited in his study, the evidence spread across his desk. When he finally arrived, his face lit up at seeing her, then darkened at her expression. Grace, what's wrong? She told him everything. Showed him the documents, the forged signatures, the shell companies. Michael's face grew darker with each revelation. He picked up the phone immediately, calling Chief Samuel. But when Chief Samuel arrived and reviewed the evidence, his expression was grave. Your Majesty, this is serious. Very serious. Chief Okafor has powerful allies. Military generals, business tycoons, political leaders across the region. If you accuse him publicly without ironclad proof, he'll destroy you. And he has enough influence to cause real problems for the crown. So what am I supposed to do? Grace demanded. Let him steal from orphans. We need to handle this carefully, Chief Samuel urged. Gather more evidence. Build an airtight case. Then move against him strategically. Michael's advisors arrived, summoned by Chief Samuel. They echoed the same message. Go slow, be cautious, don't rock the boat. One advisor, a thin man named Mr. Benson, was particularly insistent. Your Majesty, with respect to Queen Grace, perhaps it would be better to make a deal with Chief Okafor. Return the funds quietly, let him save face, avoid a public scandal that could destabilize the kingdom. Grace stared at him in disbelief. You want me to let him get away with stealing from children? I'm suggesting we consider what's best for the kingdom as a whole. What's best for the kingdom is justice. Grace's voice rose. What's best for the kingdom is showing that no one, no matter how powerful, is above the law. Michael held up his hands. Grace, I understand your anger. I share it. But we need to think strategically. Chief Okafor isn't just some corrupt official. He commands loyalty from people who could threaten my throne. If we move against him recklessly, we could trigger a political crisis, maybe even violence. Grace looked at her husband like she was seeing him for the first time. You want me to let them steal from orphans to keep your crown safe? That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying, Michael? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you're asking me to choose between protecting children and protecting your political position. I'm trying to protect you and the kingdom. Michael's frustration broke through. You don't understand how precarious our position is. The nobles already question your fitness to be queen. If we handle this wrong, they'll use it to attack us both. So your solution is to do nothing? My solution is to be smart about this. Grace gathered her evidence, shoving papers back into her bag with shaking hands. Then I'll be smart about it. But I'm not waiting for permission to do what's right. She stormed out, leaving Michael staring after her, torn between love and duty. In the corridor, Grace nearly ran into Amora, who had been hovering nearby, her phone in hand, recording every word of the argument through the cracked door. Grace went back to the orphanage. She sat with the children during lunch, watching them eat their meager portions, knowing they should have more, knowing someone had stolen from them. A little girl, maybe 6 years old, climbed into Grace's lap. Queen Grace, are you sad? A little bit, sweetheart. My mama used to say that when people are mean, you have to be brave. Are you going to be brave? Grace hugged the child close, breathing in the scent of her hair. Yes, I am. I'm going to be very brave. That evening, she made her decision. She would go public with the evidence. Not through Michael, not through the palace, not through proper channels that could be blocked and buried. She would go directly to the media, let the people know their queen's foundation was being robbed, and dare Chief Okafor to defend himself. She called a reporter she trusted, scheduled a press conference for the next day. Then she sat down to organize her evidence, preparing her statement. She was so focused that she didn't notice the palace servant, the young woman who cleaned her chambers, making a phone call from the hallway. She's going to the press tomorrow. She has documents. The voice on the other end was Amara's. Thank you, Mary. Your payment will be transferred tonight. Amara immediately called her father. She's going public tomorrow. We need to destroy her first. Tonight. Chief Okafor smiled. They'd been preparing for this moment. Everything was ready. Release everything. Make sure it's on every platform by morning. By the time she wakes up, she'll be finished. As Grace finally went to bed, exhausted but determined, she had no idea that her world was about to explode. The evidence she'd so carefully gathered against Chief Okafor would mean nothing compared to what was about to be released against her. And the friend she'd trusted most was the one holding the match to burn down everything she'd built. Grace woke to her phone buzzing with notifications. Hundreds of them. Then thousands. Her stomach knotted as she unlocked the screen and saw her name trending worldwide. But not for her press conference. She hadn't held it yet. This was something else entirely. The headline on the Lagos Times made her heart stop. Queen Grace, a calculated social climber? Leaked videos reveal her true nature. With shaking hands, she clicked the link. There on her screen was footage of her, sitting in her private chambers, talking to Amara. But it was edited, spliced together to create a narrative that destroyed her. Grace's voice saying, "I felt worthless living with family who made me a burden," was cut right before her saying it was her motivation to help orphans. The context was stripped away, leaving only the words that made her sound bitter and resentful. Another clip showed her saying, "Sometimes I wonder if Michael regrets choosing me," edited to remove Michael's immediate denial, making it seem like a confession rather than an insecurity. But the worst were the documents. Fake bank statements showing large deposits into Grace's personal account. Photoshopped images of her meeting with men in suits, labeled as Queen Grace's secret business meetings, when actually they were foundation staff members. Invoices allegedly showing she'd been billing the foundation for personal expenses. Designer clothes, jewelry, luxury items. The story painted a picture of a conniving woman who'd used her sad orphan story to manipulate a prince, married him for access to wealth and power, and was now embezzling from her own foundation to fund a lavish lifestyle. The edited videos, the fake documents, the manufactured evidence, it was all so professionally done that it looked completely real. Social media exploded. Within an hour, #QueenGraceScandal was trending globally. The comments were vicious. "I knew she was too good to be true. Nobody is that kind without an angle. She played Michael like a fool. Used her dead parents for sympathy. That orphan act was just a con. She's been stealing from children this whole time." Grace sat frozen in bed, watching her reputation disintegrate in real time. Her phone rang, Michael, but she couldn't answer. It rang again. And again. Finally, there was pounding on her door. "Grace, open this door right now." She stumbled to the door, unlocking it. Michael burst in, his face a mixture of fury and fear. "Are you seeing this? Who did this? Where did they get these videos?" "I don't know." "Michael, those videos are edited. That's not what I said, not in that context. And those documents are fake. I never." "I know," he said firmly, pulling her into his arms. "I know you. But Grace, this is bad. This is really bad. Someone orchestrated this, someone with resources and access." Grace's mind was racing. The videos were from her private chambers. The only person she'd had those conversations with was Amara. The name fell from her lips like poison. Of course. Amara had been there for every vulnerable moment, every private confession. Amara had recorded her, befriended her specifically to gather ammunition. The realization hit Grace like a physical blow. She pulled away from Michael and grabbed her phone, ignoring the flood of notifications to call Amara. It rang twice before she answered, her voice honey-sweet. "Grace, I just saw the news. I'm so sorry this is happening to you. It's horrible. You did this." Grace's voice was ice. "It was you. All of it. The recordings, the fake documents, everything." There was a pause, then Amara's voice changed completely, the false warmth vanishing. "You figured it out. I'm actually impressed. Took you longer than I expected, honestly. Why? I trusted you. I thought we were friends." Amara laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "Friends? Grace, you took what should have been mine. My father groomed me my entire life to be queen. I speak 6 languages, I studied at Oxford, I know every protocol, every custom, every political alliance that matters. I was perfect for Michael. And then you showed up with your pathetic sob story about dead parents and mean aunties, and he chose you. Michael chose me because he wanted to. You can't steal a person. You played on his sympathy," Amara spat. "That whole orphan act, the kindness routine, it was all calculated. You knew exactly what you were doing. I was being myself. That's something you apparently don't understand. Well, everyone sees through you now. Everyone knows what you really are, a gold digger who used a tragedy to manipulate a prince. And by tomorrow, you'll be finished. My father is calling for your arrest. The evidence against you is overwhelming. You're done, Grace." The line went dead. Grace stood there, phone in hand, the full weight of betrayal crushing her. The woman she'd trusted, confided in, considered a friend, had been destroying her from the inside all along. Outside the palace, protests had already begun. Hundreds of people gathered with signs. "Divorce the fraud. Send her back where she came from. Justice for the stolen money." The crowd was angry, believing every manufactured lie they'd been fed. Michael's emergency council meeting was already underway. Grace could hear raised voices from the conference room. She approached quietly, standing outside the door, listening. "Your Majesty, the evidence is damning," a voice she recognized as Mr. Benson said. "Even if some of it is fabricated, the public believes it. Your approval ratings have dropped 15 points overnight just by association." "I don't care about approval ratings," Michael snapped. "Then care about the stability of your crown. Sir, some council members are already calling for an annulment. They believe the Queen has brought the monarchy into disrepute. An annulment is out of the question. Then perhaps the Queen could retire from public life temporarily. Step back from her duties until this scandal passes. It would show that you're taking the matter seriously." Another voice, older and more measured, probably one of the senior advisors. "Your Majesty, we all have great affection for Queen Grace, but we must consider what's best for the kingdom. If this scandal continues to grow, it could undermine your entire reign. Perhaps a temporary separation would be wise. Not a divorce, just distance until we can investigate the allegations properly." There was a long silence. Then Michael's voice, strained and tired. "I need time to think about the best solution. I need to consider all options." Grace's heart shattered. Time to think. All options. He was considering sending her away. Standing outside that door, Grace felt like she was 14 again, standing outside her aunt's house after the funeral, listening to Beatrice discuss whether to take her in. The feeling of being unwanted, of being a burden, of being something people had to deal with, came flooding back. She turned and walked away before anyone could find her there. She knew what she had to do. Michael would be better off without her. The kingdom would be better off without her. She'd become exactly what everyone had always said she was: a problem to be solved, a scandal to be managed, a mistake to be corrected. It was time to leave before she destroyed everything Michael had built. It was time to go back to being nobody. Grace wrote the letter by candlelight, her tears spotting the paper as she formed each word. My dearest Michael, I love you too much to let me destroy everything you've built. Maybe they're right. Maybe I never belonged in your world. You deserve a queen who strengthens your throne, not one who threatens it. I'm going back to where I came from. Please don't look for me. Be happy. Be the king you were meant to be. All my love always, Grace. She packed a small bag with just her mother's locket, a change of clothes, and what little money she had. She left behind all the jewelry, all the gowns, all the trappings of royalty. They'd never really been hers anyway. She was just borrowing them, playing dress-up like everyone said. But before she could leave, she had to say goodbye to one place. The orphanage. The children deserved to know she hadn't abandoned them, even if she'd failed to protect them. She arrived at 3 in the morning to find Mrs. Johnson still awake in her office, the weight of the Foundation's uncertain future keeping her from sleep. Your Majesty. Mrs. Johnson's shock quickly turned to concern. What are you doing here? Are you all right? I came to say goodbye, Grace said, her voice breaking. I failed you. I failed all of you. I couldn't protect the Foundation. I couldn't stop them from stealing from the children. And now I'm the scandal, I'm the problem, and I'm so sorry. Mrs. Johnson moved around the desk and took Grace's hands in her own. Failed us? Your Majesty, you're the only one who ever saw us as worthy of protection. You're the only one who fought for these children when no one else cared. But look what's happened. The Foundation is nearly bankrupt. My reputation is destroyed. I can't help anyone now. That's not true. The small voice came from the doorway. Grace turned to see children filing into the office, one by one, their eyes heavy with sleep but determined. The little girl who'd climbed into Grace's lap earlier stepped forward. We heard the news, Queen Grace. People are saying mean things about you on TV. But we know the truth. You're kind. You saved us. More children crowded in, and Mrs. Johnson smiled. They've been working on something. Show her, children. The children held up handmade signs, crayons and markers on poster board. Queen Grace saved me, in a child's careful printing. Orphans stand with our queen, in bright purple letters. She chose justice, with a drawing of Grace holding a child's hand. When word spread that you were fighting for our funding, that you discovered people were stealing from us, the children wanted to help, Mrs. Johnson explained. They're planning to march to the palace tomorrow. To show everyone that we believe in you, that we know who you really are. Grace fell to her knees, and the children swarmed her, little arms wrapping around her shoulders, her waist, her neck. She was crying now, but for the first time in days, they weren't tears of despair. Why would you do this for me? You're just children. This could be dangerous. A boy of about 12, his eyes serious, stepped forward. Grace recognized him. He was taller now, but she remembered him. The hungry child in the market from over a year ago, the one she'd given her last 50 naira to. You gave me food when you had nothing, he said simply. You were poor then too, but you helped me anyway. Now we give you something, we stand with you. That's what family does. Grace looked at their faces, these children who'd been abandoned, neglected, forgotten by the world. They had every reason to be bitter, to be selfish, to protect themselves first. But here they were, ready to march for her, to defend her when the whole world had turned against her. She'd been so focused on how the nobles saw her, on proving herself worthy of the crown, that she'd forgotten the people who mattered most. These children didn't care about proper protocol or which fork she used. They cared that she saw them, valued them, fought for them. I was going to leave, Grace admitted. I thought Michael would be better off without me. No, Mrs. Johnson said firmly. Running away would prove all those liars right. You need to stay and fight. Not for the crown, not for public opinion, but for these children and for the truth. Grace looked at the signs, at the determined faces, at the love shining in eyes that had seen too much hardship. They were right. Running away was what Aunt Beatrice would have wanted, what Amara expected. It was giving up on everything she'd fought for. She stayed at the orphanage that night, sleeping on a small cot in the director's office, surrounded by the children who refused to leave her side. They formed a protective circle around her, these small warriors, and for the first time since the scandal broke, Grace felt safe. When dawn broke, she stood at the window watching the sun rise over Lagos. She thought about her parents, about the kindness they'd taught her, about how they'd raised her to stand up for what was right even when it was hard. She thought about Michael finding her goodbye letter. She thought about Amara's triumphant face, certain she'd won. Grace made a decision. She wasn't the scared orphan locked in an attic anymore. She was Queen Grace. And queens didn't run from battles, they fought them. She turned to the children, who were waking up, rubbing sleep from their eyes. "All right," she said, her voice steady and strong. "If we're going to march, let's make sure everyone hears us." Michael found the letter on Grace's pillow at 4 in the morning. He'd finally left the endless council meeting, exhausted and frustrated by advisors telling him to choose between his wife and his kingdom. He'd wanted to hold Grace, tell her they'd figure it out together. Instead, he found her gone and a letter that made his heart stop. No, 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 no. He was running through the palace, shouting for guards. Find the Queen. Search the entire palace. Now. Chief Samuel appeared, alarmed. "Your Majesty, what's wrong?" "She's gone. She left. She thinks I want her to leave." Michael's voice broke. He showed Chief Samuel the letter, his hands shaking. The older man read it, his face grave. "Your Majesty, in the council meeting, you said you needed time to think about the best solution. I meant time to think about how to destroy whoever did this to her. Time to plan our counterattack. I didn't mean..." Michael sat down hard on the bed. "She heard me. She was outside the door, and she heard me say I needed to consider all options. She thinks I'm abandoning her. Then we find her and tell her the truth." Michael was already pulling out his phone, calling Grace's number. It went straight to voicemail. He tried again. And again. Where would she go? Not back to her aunt, certainly. The foundation. She'd go to the orphanage. He was halfway out the door when a guard appeared. "Your Majesty, there's something happening at the palace gates. You need to see this." Michael followed him to a window overlooking the main entrance. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. Hundreds of children were marching up the avenue toward the palace. Not rioting, not violent, but walking in organized rows, carrying signs, chanting, "Justice for Queen Grace. We stand with our queen." Behind the children were adults, teachers, social workers, families. A peaceful but powerful demonstration growing larger with each passing minute. And at the front of the march, walking tall despite the cameras and the crowds, was Grace. She wasn't running away. She was coming back to fight. Michael felt his chest tighten with love and pride. This was the woman he'd married, the one who gave when she had nothing, who fought for the powerless even when it cost her everything. He turned to Chief Samuel. "We're going out there. Right now. No protocol, no official statement. We're going to her." "Your Majesty, the optics." "I don't care about the optics. My wife is leading a march of orphans to defend herself because she thought I'd abandoned her. I'm going to show her and everyone else exactly where I stand." Michael walked out of the palace doors, down the marble steps, past the confused guards, straight toward the marching crowd. The cameras swiveled to follow him. The crowd quieted. Grace froze, her eyes meeting Michael's across the distance. He walked to her, in front of all the cameras, all the judgment, all the watching world. When he reached her, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "You were going to leave me?" Grace's voice was small. "I thought I was destroying you. Your advisors want me gone. The people hate me. I don't care what they want. I love you. The woman who gives everything for others, who fights for the powerless, who leads a march of children to defend truth and justice. That's who I married. That's who I choose every single day, no matter what it costs. But your crown means nothing without you beside me. Grace, I'm not king because of my title. I'm king because of what I do with that title. And what I'm going to do right now is stand with my wife as we expose the truth together. He took her hand, turned to face the cameras, and said clearly, "My wife, Queen Grace, is innocent. She has been the victim of a coordinated attack designed to destroy her reputation and steal from the children she's dedicated her life to protecting. Today, we're going to reveal the truth. All of it. And we're going to let the people decide who they believe." Grace kneeled down to the children surrounding her. "Why did you come? I told you this could be dangerous." The little girl who'd started everything smiled up at her. "Because you came for us when we had no one. Now we come for you. That's what family does." The image of Queen Grace kneeling among the orphans, her husband standing beside her, the children's homemade signs of support, it swept across social media like wildfire. Within minutes, #WeStandWithGrace began trending. People started questioning the narrative they'd been fed. If she was such a fraud, why did these children love her? If she'd been stealing from the foundation, why were the orphans defending her? From his office window, Chief Okafor watched the march and felt the first stirrings of panic. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Grace was supposed to crumble, to run away, to be destroyed. Instead, she'd come back stronger, backed by an army of children whose testimony would be powerful precisely because they had no political agenda, only truth. He picked up his phone and called his most powerful ally, a military general who owed him favors. "We need to move now. Force the king to choose, his orphan queen or political stability. He can't have both." But what Chief Okafor didn't realize was that Michael had already chosen. And when you force a king to choose between power and love, between political convenience and justice, and he chooses the latter, you've already lost. The children's march continued toward the palace, growing larger with each block, and with every step, the truth came closer to the light. The press conference was scheduled for 2 o'clock, giving Grace and Michael time to prepare their evidence and statements. But at noon, Chief Okafor made his move. Every major news outlet received an urgent press release. Grace watched it break on live television, her blood running cold. Chief Okafor has called an emergency press conference to present evidence of fraud and embezzlement by Queen Grace, the news anchor announced. He's calling for her immediate arrest and investigation. Within minutes, Chief Okafor appeared on screen, flanked by lawyers and clutching a folder of documents. He looked grave, righteous, a man forced to expose uncomfortable truths. "It pains me to come forward with this information," he began, his voice heavy with false regret. "But as a loyal citizen of this kingdom, I cannot stand by while the crown is abused. I have evidence that Queen Grace has been embezzling from her own foundation, creating fake orphan cases to collect government funding, and using her position to enrich herself at the expense of vulnerable children." He held up documents that looked official and damning. Invoices with Grace's forged signature, bank statements showing suspicious transfers, testimonies from witnesses who claimed Grace had bribed them to inflate orphan numbers. It was all fake, but it looked real enough to convince anyone who wanted to believe it. "I call upon His Majesty King Michael to do the right thing and allow a full investigation. If Queen Grace is innocent, she has nothing to fear from scrutiny. But if she's guilty, she must face justice like any other citizen." It was a brilliant strategy. By framing it as a call for investigation rather than direct accusation, he positioned himself as reasonable, concerned, patriotic. And by challenging Michael to prove Grace's innocence, he put the burden of proof on them rather than on himself to prove guilt. Grace stared at the television, feeling the trap close around her. "He's turning my own accusations back on me. Everyone will think I was trying to deflect by blaming him first." But Chief Samuel had been working through the night, and now he entered with his own folder, much thicker than Okafor's. "Your Majesty, I think it's time we showed them what real evidence looks like. He spread documents across the table, the actual embezzlement trail, traced through shell companies and fake vendors, all leading back to accounts controlled by Chief Okafor and his business associates. More importantly, he had something else. The palace servant who helped Amara, the young woman named Mary, she came to me this morning. She's terrified but willing to testify. Amara paid her to spy on Queen Grace, to provide access to her private chambers, to sabotage the protocol briefing before the state dinner. She has bank records of the payments Amara made to her. Grace felt hope surge. She'll really testify, even knowing what it could cost her. Chief Samuel nodded. She has a younger sister in the Foundation, one of the children who marched today. Seeing those children defend you broke something in her. She said she couldn't live with herself knowing she'd helped hurt the one person who'd actually cared about her sister. Michael was already on the phone with his communications team. Cancel our press conference. We're doing a televised national address instead. I want every channel broadcasting this. Grace and I are presenting the evidence together. Your Majesty, Mr. Benson cautioned. Are you sure? If this backfires, if public opinion doesn't shift, you'll have tied yourself irrevocably to the Queen's fate. Michael looked at the advisor with cold eyes. I'm already tied to her fate. She's my wife. Now get out of my way and help us set this up, or resign. Mr. Benson left quietly, and preparations began. By 4 o'clock, every television in Nigeria was tuned to the palace broadcast. Michael and Grace stood together, united, with Chief Samuel and the evidence arranged behind them. Michael spoke first, his voice clear and authoritative. Citizens of this kingdom, over the past few days, you've heard serious accusations against Queen Grace. You've seen videos, documents, and statements that paint her as corrupt and manipulative. Today, we're going to show you the truth. He began methodically presenting the evidence. The real embezzlement trail, the shell companies, the fake vendors, all connected to Chief Okafor's business empire. Financial experts testified via video link, explaining how the money had been systematically stolen. Then Mary stepped forward, her face pale but determined. My name is Mary, and I worked as a palace servant. Amara, Chief Okafor's daughter, paid me to spy on Queen Grace. She gave me a recording device to place in the Queen's chambers. She asked me to switch the protocol briefing before the state dinner to make sure the Queen would fail publicly. I did all of it because I needed the money and because I believed what they told me, that Queen Grace didn't belong here. Her voice broke. But my little sister lives in the Foundation. She's one of the children who marched today. When I saw her holding that sign, defending Queen Grace, I realized what I'd done. I'd helped hurt the one person who actually cared about children like my sister. I'm here to tell the truth because I owe Queen Grace that much, even though I know it might mean going to prison. Grace stepped forward, looking directly into the camera. I am not perfect. I make mistakes. I grew up mistreated by my own family after losing my parents, and I'm still learning how to be queen. But I have never and will never steal from children who need help. That's not who I am, no matter what title I carry. She held up her mother's locket. My mother taught me that kindness matters more than status. My father taught me to stand up for what's right even when it's hard. I created the foundation to honor their memory and to ensure no child feels as worthless as I once did. Every single naira that was stolen from those children is a knife in my heart. The evidence was overwhelming. The unedited recordings showed the context Amara had stripped away. The financial trail was clear and documented. Mary's testimony explained the sabotage. Within an hour, social media began to shift. But Chief Okafor had one last card to play. He'd been gathering his allies, calling in favors, preparing for this moment. As Grace's broadcast ended, protests erupted, but this time they were different. Thousands of people, organized by the Orphan's example, gathered in support of Grace. They carried signs, chanted, demanded justice not against Grace but against those who tried to destroy her. Chief Okafor watched the tide turning and made a desperate decision. He would force a crisis, create chaos, and in that chaos, seize power. He activated his network of corrupt officials, called his military allies, and prepared to move against the crown itself. The truth was coming out, but he'd burned down the kingdom before he'd let an orphan queen defeat him. The trial began 3 days later in the High Court of Justice, with every seat filled and cameras broadcasting to millions. Chief Okafor sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, his face a mask of offended dignity. Amara sat beside him, her confidence cracked but not broken. They'd hired the best lawyers money could buy, and their strategy was clear. Attack Grace's character, question her motives, suggest that even if some embezzlement occurred, she wasn't innocent either. The lead prosecutor, working in coordination with Michael's legal team, was a sharp woman named Barrister Williams. She stood to give her opening statement, her voice carrying clearly through the packed courtroom. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Chief Okafor and his daughter Amara orchestrated a sophisticated campaign to embezzle funds from the Queen's Foundation while simultaneously destroying Queen Grace's reputation to prevent her from uncovering their crimes. This was not a crime of opportunity. It was a calculated long-term conspiracy born from jealousy, greed, and a fundamental contempt for the vulnerable children they were stealing from. Chief Okafor's lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Ibrahim, countered with his own opening. Your Honor, my client is a pillar of this community. He has served this kingdom for 30 years. The prosecution would have you believe he would risk everything to steal from orphans. The truth is far simpler. Queen Grace, inexperienced and overwhelmed by her position, made financial mistakes. Rather than admit her incompetence, she's attempting to deflect blame onto a respected leader. This trial is really about a woman who married above her station and is now desperately trying to justify her position. Grace sat in the gallery with Michael, her hands clenched in her lap. The trial proceeded with methodical precision. Financial experts took the stand, walking through the embezzlement trail. Each fake vendor, each shell company, each fraudulent payment traced back to accounts Okafor controlled. The experts were dry, technical, but devastating in their thoroughness. Then it was Grace's turn to testify. She walked to the stand, her heart pounding, and swore to tell the truth. Barrister Williams began gently. Your Majesty, can you tell the court about your background? Grace took a breath and began. I was born to wonderful parents who taught me kindness and courage. When I was 14, there was a fire. My parents died trying to save me, but I was at a friend's house that night. I survived, and they didn't. Her voice cracked, but she continued. I went to live with my Aunt Beatrice. For 8 years, she made me feel worthless. I worked from dawn until night, doing every household task while my cousins lived in comfort. She would tell me I should be grateful she didn't throw me out on the street, that I was a burden, that I'd never be anything. How did you survive those years? By remembering what my parents taught me. That my worth wasn't determined by how others treated me. That kindness, real kindness, is what matters. So even when I had nothing, I tried to help others who had less. Is that why you created the foundation? Yes. I knew what it felt like to be unwanted, to feel invisible. I created the foundation so no child would ever have to feel that way. Every child who comes through our doors matters. They're seen, valued, loved. Barrister Williams showed Grace financial documents. Did you authorize these payments? Grace examined them, shaking her head. No, that's not my signature. I never approved payments to any of these vendors. I don't even recognize these company names. When did you discover the embezzlement? When Mrs. Johnson, the foundation director, told me we were nearly bankrupt despite having full funding. I went through every document and found the trail of fake payments. That's when I knew someone was stealing from the children. Mr. Ibrahim rose for cross-examination, his smile predatory. Your Majesty, you've told us a very sad story about your childhood. Very moving. But isn't it true that you've used that sad story to manipulate people throughout your rise to power? No. You used it to gain Prince Michael's sympathy, didn't you? You knew he was looking for someone authentic, so you performed authenticity. Grace's voice was steady. I didn't perform anything. I was myself. That's all I've ever been. Yourself. You mean an orphan who'd lived as a servant? I was an orphan who was mistreated by family, yes. But I was never a servant. I was family being exploited. Semantics. The point is, you come from nothing, and suddenly you're queen. That's quite an elevation. Doesn't that suggest you're very skilled at presenting yourself in advantageous ways? Grace met his eyes directly. I didn't choose to lose my parents. I didn't choose to be mistreated by my aunt. I didn't even choose to meet Prince Michael. He was watching me in the market when I gave my last money to a hungry child. None of that was calculation. It was just life. Or a very clever act. Tell me, Your Majesty, how convenient that you discovered this embezzlement just as you were being exposed for your own inadequacies as queen. One might think you needed a distraction. One might think that if one was looking for conspiracy instead of truth. I discovered the embezzlement because the foundation director told me children were going hungry. That's not convenience, that's tragedy. The exchange went on, but Grace didn't waver. When she finally stepped down, exhausted but unbowed, Michael gave her a small nod of pride. The orphans took the stand next, and this was where the trial transformed from dry financial testimony to something that moved the courtroom to tears. One by one, children spoke about how Grace had helped them. The boy from the market, now 13 and articulate, testified, "She gave me money for food when she was poor too. She didn't know anyone was watching. She didn't do it for credit. She did it because she's kind." That's real. A 9-year-old girl who'd been in the march spoke. "Queen Grace comes to read to us every week. She knows all our names. She asks about our schoolwork. She cares. People who steal don't care like that." The testimony was simple, honest, and powerful precisely because it came from children who had no political agenda. They simply told the truth about the woman they knew. Then Mary took the stand, her voice shaking but clear. "I betrayed Queen Grace. Amara paid me to spy on her, to sabotage her. I needed the money, and I believed what Amara told me, that Queen Grace didn't belong in the palace. I was wrong. I helped hurt the only person who cared about children like my sister. I'm here because I can't live with that lie anymore." She provided bank records showing payments from Amara's personal account, text messages detailing instructions for the sabotage, even the recording device Amara had given her. The evidence was damning and irrefutable. When it came time for Chief Okafor to testify, his confidence was visibly shaken. Barrister Williams tore through his defenses methodically, showing how the shell companies were registered to his associates, how the money trail led to his accounts, how he'd used his position to approve the fake vendors. "I was trying to protect the kingdom from an unqualified queen," he finally admitted, his composure cracking. "She's an orphan who doesn't understand power or politics. She would have destroyed everything my daughter was prepared for her whole life. So you decided to destroy her first? To steal from children to fund your political games?" "I didn't steal, I redirected funds for better purposes." "You mean your purposes? Your bank accounts? Your power?" Amara's testimony was equally revealing. When pressed, her resentment poured out. "She took what should have been mine. My father prepared me my whole life. I studied, I trained, I perfected every skill. And Prince Michael chose her because she had a sad story. It's not fair. So you decided to destroy her marriage, her reputation, her foundation?" "I decided to show everyone what she really was, a commoner playing dress-up." The judge finally called for closing arguments. Barrister Williams summarized the overwhelming evidence. The financial trail, the testimonies, the confessions, all pointing to a calculated conspiracy to embezzle funds and destroy Grace's reputation. Mr. Ibrahim's closing was desperate, trying to paint Chief Okafor as a misguided protector of traditional values, but the evidence spoke too clearly. The judge didn't even need to recess to consider. I find the defendants, Chief Okafor and Amara Okafor, guilty on all charges: fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, defamation, and obstruction of justice. They are hereby sentenced to 7 years in prison and ordered to repay all stolen funds plus damages. Furthermore, they are stripped of all titles and honors. Court is adjourned. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed out to file stories. Chief Okafor's face went white as guards moved to take him into custody. Amara burst into tears, her carefully constructed world collapsing. But Grace didn't feel triumphant. She felt tired and sad. She'd won, but the victory had cost so much pain, so much betrayal, so much public humiliation. As they left the courthouse, thousands waited outside. The crowd erupted in cheers, chanting, "Queen Grace! Queen Grace!" Grace stepped forward to address them, Michael at her side. "Today justice was served," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "But this isn't about me winning or them losing. This is about protecting children who can't protect themselves. This is about remembering that power and titles mean nothing if we don't use them to help others. I am still learning how to be queen. I will make more mistakes. But I promise you this, I will always fight for the powerless, even when it costs me everything." The crowd's roar was deafening. Social media exploded with support. #OurQueen trended globally. Grace's approval rating soared to 85%, higher than it had ever been. But as they drove back to the palace, Grace was quiet, processing everything that had happened. "Are you all right?" Michael asked. "I'm sad for them," Grace admitted. Amara was so consumed by jealousy that she destroyed her own life. Chief Okafor let his ambitions turn him into a criminal. They could have done so much good with their resources and influence, but they chose cruelty instead. "That's the difference between you and them," Michael said softly. "Even after everything they did, you still see them as human beings who made terrible choices, not as enemies to destroy. That's why you're Queen Grace. Not because you're perfect at protocol or because you never make mistakes. Because you lead with kindness even when you'd be justified in leading with vengeance." Grace leaned against him as the palace came into view. The crisis was over, but she knew she'd been fundamentally changed by it. She was no longer the insecure girl trying to prove she belonged. She was Queen Grace, and she'd earned that title not through birth or marriage, but through fire and truth and standing firm when the world tried to break her. 6 months later, Grace stood at the podium in the Foundation's newly renovated courtyard. The building had been expanded, new programs launched, and transparency measures implemented to ensure nothing like the embezzlement could happen again. Today was the Foundation's first anniversary celebration, and hundreds had gathered to mark the occasion. Grace had just finished her speech about the Foundation's accomplishments when she noticed a figure at the back of the crowd. Her heart skipped. Amara, released early for good behavior and cooperation with investigators, stood uncertainly by the gate, looking like she wanted to run away. After the ceremony ended, Amara approached slowly. She looked different. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup, no mask of superiority. Just a young woman who'd lost everything and was trying to find a way forward. "I don't deserve your time," Amara said quietly. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Prison gave me time to think about who I'd become. You were everything I pretended to be, and I hated you for it. I was jealous because you were real, and I was always performing." Grace studied her for a long moment. "Thank you for that. What will you do now?" "I don't know. Start over, I guess. Try to become someone actually worth knowing." Grace made a decision, one that Michael would laugh about later, calling it pure grace. The Foundation needs volunteers. If you want to learn what real service looks like, if you're serious about changing, we could use the help. Amara's eyes widened in shock. "You'd let me work with you after everything I did? Everyone deserves a second chance. I almost gave up on myself during all of this. But people stood by me, people I didn't expect. The orphans marched for me when I thought I was alone. Now I'm standing by you. if you're serious about changing. But Amara, if you betray my trust again, there won't be a third chance. Tears streamed down Amara's face. I am serious. I really am. I want to be better. I want to be the person my father never taught me to be. Then let's start with the children. They're excellent judges of character, and they're very good teachers about what really matters. Over the following months, Amara proved herself through consistent, humble service. She worked alongside the foundation staff, reading to children, helping with homework, learning what it meant to give without expecting anything in return. It wasn't easy, and there were days when old resentment surfaced, but Grace was patient, and slowly, Amara began to change. One evening, Grace and Michael stood on the palace balcony watching the sunset paint Lagos in gold and purple. Michael pulled her close. You know, when I married you, I thought I was saving you. But you saved yourself. And you saved this kingdom. Grace smiled. We saved each other. That's what real partnership is. Ready for the next challenge? My mother always said being queen was never boring. Grace laughed, but her voice was confident. Bring it on. I'm not the scared girl locked in an attic anymore. I'm Queen Grace. And I'm just getting started. As they stood together, united and strong, Grace thought about everything she'd survived. Her parents' death, her aunt's cruelty, the destroyed invitation, the locked attic, the convoy that came for her, the conspiracy that tried to destroy her crown, and the orphans who'd marched to save her. Each trial had forged her into someone stronger, kinder, wiser. She touched her mother's locket, feeling the familiar comfort of her parents' presence. They would be proud of her now, not because she was queen, but because she'd maintained her kindness through every storm. She'd learned that true power wasn't about crowns or titles, it was about what you did with whatever power you had, how you used it to lift others up. The sun set completely, and the palace lights came on, illuminating the building where Grace and Michael would continue their work. There would be more challenges ahead, more people who would question her, more obstacles to overcome. But Grace was ready. She'd learned the most important lesson of all. Kindness isn't weakness, and a woman who has survived the worst life can offer? She's unstoppable. If this story inspired you, if Grace's journey reminded you that your worth isn't determined by how others see you, if you believe that kindness and integrity will always triumph over cruelty and deception, then please share this story. Hit that like button, subscribe to Folktales by Inaya for more inspiring stories of courage, redemption, and the power of staying true to yourself. Because the world needs more stories that remind us, your past doesn't define your future, and the crown you wear isn't made of gold, it's made of character. Thank you for listening. And until next time, remember, be kind, be brave, and never let anyone tell you that you don't belong.